What's something you've always thought was normal until you realized other people didn't experience it? Story 1. Ever since I can remember, I got periodic weird sparkly things in my field of vision. Rainbow jagged circular-ish thing that gradually got bigger until my head seemed to pass through the ring, and then it faded. Happened all the time. I would get really cranky, achy, and tired afterward. Always happened when my mom would take me shopping for clothes or groceries. She used to get so annoyed when I wanted to leave after 10 minutes at the mall. In my 20s, I mentioned it in passing. Oh, hang on, I have a sparkly thing. I hate these because now I'm going to have a headache. Mom was like, wait, what? Yeah, I have chronic migraine with aura, and fluorescent light is a primary trigger. Story 2. When I was a kid, I'd walk to school. When it was cold, I'd come home and my mom would ask, why are you wheezing? I'd shrug because I thought it was just what happened to people when it was cold. Found out several years later that I had exercise-induced asthma, and cold weather was my main trigger. Story 3. I grew up with some fairly questionable dental care that was free through my dad's tribal health care. I had a lot of dental problems, likely stemming from my mom giving me apple juice in a baby bottle, as well as enamel that never developed correctly. During the annual dentist trip, my older brother and sister never had cavities, but I always had 4, 5 or more, so the visits were pretty hellacious. I would complain about the procedures and how badly they hurt. I was 6-ish, but my family were hard-ass and tough-love people. So my complaints were dismissed as whining and worse, told that I deserved it for not brushing my teeth better, so I stopped complaining. 27 years later, while going through my 5th root canal, I was shaking and tense and sweating. The dentist kept asking if I was okay like they always did. I said, yeah, I'm fine, like I always said. This time, though, the dentist stopped the procedure, pulled his mask off and said, are you experiencing any pain? You seem like you are. I said, of course I am. It's a root canal. These always hurt terribly, but I'll be okay. Let's just push through it. He said, you shouldn't feel anything at all, only some pressure, but zero pain. Root canal shouldn't hurt. Then he numbed me more, started again and kept numbing me until I felt nothing. 5 minutes in, he stopped again because I was crying and he asked if it still hurt. I said, no, not all, and smiled crookedly through my completely numb face. I thought dental procedures were supposed to hurt. I was 33 when a dentist finally realized I was suffering, but self-reporting, I was fine. There was always more numbing they could have done. I suffered for 3 decades because I was told to stop complaining as a 6-yo. If you feel pain, any pain at all, tell your dentist. Zero pain is normal. Advocate for yourself. Also, don't tell young children to stop complaining about pain because they might listen and you cause them to hurt for a lifetime. Story 4. Ever since I was little, I would frequently feel my heart kind of flop around and skip beats. I always thought this was normal until a doctor noticed it during a routine physical exam. He asked if I was nervous about being at the doctor, and I told him my heart always does that. Turns out I just have a lot of premature ventricular contractions. My cardiologist told me they're very common, but most people don't actually feel them all the time. Story 5. When I'm in a room with other people, part of my brain is paying attention to every conversation my ears can pick up, all at once. Specifically, it's paying attention to the emotional temper of each conversation, in case someone suddenly starts having a bad time. Turns out most of you just listen to one conversation at a time. My way is actually a consequence of growing up around an explosive parent. Deep down, I don't want anything to happen that will lead to an angry person yelling at us. This also explains why I have a hard time in groups bigger than 10 or so. There tends to be too many voices having different conversations, and I get overwhelmed processing it all. If I can't keep up, I feel vulnerable and exposed, and things cycle downward from there. Story 6. My parents worked full-time and left me home alone a lot. They never checked if I had homework or anything like that, so I'd just come home from school, watch TV, play with my dog, whatever, by myself. I literally never did my homework because no one was there to make me. More often than not, I was a bit bored and lonely. Most days I would try and find a friend to come hang out. I'd ring, this was in the 90s, every single kid in my class to come over and play. They always said no. They weren't allowed because they had homework to do and because my parents weren't home. I didn't understand the concept of not allowed. My parents weren't even there. I could just go anywhere I wanted. Why couldn't they? It wasn't until I was an adult with my own kids that I realized their parents were just a lot more responsible than mine. Story 7. My answer? I always thought it was normal for people to have dinner as late as 9 or 10 p.m. Growing up, my family would eat really late because my parents worked long hours, and it just became part of our routine. It wasn't until I started having dinner with friends or staying over at their houses that I realized most families eat around 6 or 7 p.m. I remember being so confused, like, wait, you guys eat this early? Now that I think about it, we probably got a lot of weird looks from neighbors for having dinner so late all the time. Story 8. I thought that everyone stopped eating dinner together as a family as soon as you learned how to eat without making a giant mess and no longer needed to be supervised while you ate your food. For basically my whole life, other than the first few years, everyone in my family has ate dinner in separate areas at different times, and I thought that the only families that ate dinner together were religious families. I quickly discovered how wrong I was and how unconventional my family is. My parents are both functioning alcoholics in denial and did the bare minimum to ensure I had food and made it to school, but that was about it. Once I finished elementary school and started going to middle school, they were never involved in anything in my life, and I moved out at the age of 14, which they had no issues with as long as I was still going to school, which I was. Story 9. Being able to dissociate on command, apparently that's a symptom of my CPTSD, but for a long time I thought everyone had the ability to just stop feeling all emotions and make the world seem fake like a video game. That's not the case. I found that out at 24 when I finally found a good therapist. Story 10. Honestly, anxiety in general. I didn't realize it wasn't normal to have extreme anxiety about things that were absolutely minuscule until my mid-teens years. I was joking to a friend that I hoped I would throw up before a party we were going to instead of during, and she said, "Why would you throw up before or during?" I replied something like, "You know, when you get that dizzy, nervous feeling when you know you're supposed to be somewhere around a group of people, so you have to throw up to feel better?" Needless to say, she did not know what I was talking about and asked, "Have I ever talked to a doctor about it?" I honestly just assumed everyone felt like that when they went to parties, new places, appointments, or just anywhere, really. Ever since I was a child, I would constantly worry and get anxiety. Sometimes it was even over things that weren't a big deal, like answering the phone or going to a place I had already been dozens of times. I was constantly thinking someone was mad at me, even if absolutely nothing happened for the thought to even enter my mind. The worst was when I was laying in bed at night and I would just feel this sense of impending doom, as if something terrible was going to happen out of nowhere. I'm not going to lie. Even as an adult, it still blows my mind that there are people who don't experience anxiety on a day-to-day basis. To those people I say, what's it like to be God's favorite? LOL. Edited for a few spelling mistakes. Story 11. When I think to myself, I often use we. If I'm getting up to get some coffee, I'll think, let's go get some coffee. It's not a split personality thing. I think I distinguish between the parts of me that does/feels/thinks things and the meta part of me that observes myself. I saw a Reddit post about this a few years ago, and I realized that a few people do the same thing, but most people think it's very weird. Story 12. Dreaming while awake and orchestrating my sleeping dreams. Turns out I had severe sleep apnea for all my life with 86 apnea, stop breathing, events per hour, or about every minute and a half. I was treated with CPAP and my whole world changed for the better after the first 8 hours of real sleep. Story 13. I thought it was normal to have headaches nearly daily till I brought it up to my former psychiatrist when I was 18. He asked me if I was in any pain because I kept grimacing because my head was hurting so much. He referred me to neurology. It took years, but I finally have the headaches mostly under control thanks to medication, PT, and trigger point injections. We also recently found an abortive med that actually works without major side effects. Story 14. I am well into my 50s. In the last 3 years, I have discovered that most people can visualize and have the other senses in their head. I have none. Aphantasia is not visualizing. I realize most people have a narrator or internal monologue. I have none. My brain is so quiet compared to friends and family. I don't know how they put up with all that going on. Story 15. I used to hear a full symphony in my head when I lay down at night. Most of the time it's mellow with beautiful violins, oboes, French horns. It slowly builds and can be quite moving. It's never songs I've heard or know. I have zero musical talent, so in my head it all stays. I say used to because once I developed tinnitus, the ringing has taken place of the music. Pretty crappy trade-off. Story 16. I grew up in a house overlooking the St. John River. It never occurred to me that it was unusual that the river would sometimes be flowing in one direction and sometimes in the other direction. I thought all rivers did that and it was normal. The tides in the Bay of Fundy are so high they cause the lower end of the river to reverse direction for a while at high tide. Story 17. I thought it was normal for everything to hurt. Catching a ball would leave my palm feeling raw and bruised for days. Swinging a baseball bat would hurt my shoulder, my elbow, my hip. I had terrible pain in my hands from when I was about 12, and I remember my grandma saying, "Yeah, you got the arthritis too," and that was that. You know the saying, no pain, no gain? I thought that everyone playing every sport or doing any form of exercise was playing through the pain, And I thought I was a serious wimp for not being able to stand it and play through it like they did. My whole family would make fun of me for having such a low pain threshold. Every day, I'd wake up with pain in every region of my body for one reason or another. Bonked my knee on a coffee table 6 months ago. Yep, it would still hurt. Wore shoes that pinched my pinky toe the previous year. Yeah, I'd still be limping from the pain, but I would try really hard not to limp because that would bother my hip. All these pains added up but never went away. Ever since I was little. And I thought this was normal. I'm 42 now. About 6 months ago, I had an epiphany and asked my husband if I complained about pain a lot. His instant answer was, yep. I explained that I only ever tell him about the pains that could impact our day. Pains that are unbearable, so we might need to change plans to accommodate, which is maybe 10% of the pain I'm experiencing at any given time. We talked it out and realized that my experience of pain is actually very abnormal. I've spent the last 6 months going to specialists, learning pain management, starting a vitamin and medication regimen, and making much progress. It is amazing the things I can do now. I have more energy, more stamina, and more mental clarity because I'm not exhausting myself by being in pain 24/7. It's amazing. I bonk my knee, and it hurts for a minute. Then, I actually forget about it because it stops hurting. All my life, a simple bonked knee would cause me pain for months on end. Now I get hurt, and in a short while it stops hurting. It stops. I swear, pain never used to stop. It's amazing. Side note, all the people who told me I had a low pain threshold while I was experiencing horrific pain every freaking day of my life can seriously just go themselves. Edit. I forgot to say what was wrong. The doctors are calling it fibromyalgia, which is a disorder characterized by widespread musculoskeletal pain accompanied by fatigue, sleep, memory, and mood issues. Researchers believe that fibromyalgia amplifies painful sensations by affecting the way your brain and spinal cord process painful and non-painful signals. Story 18. Mirroring other people's behavior and making a personality fitting for them. Results in me being super stressed when I meet new people because I don't know how to behave. Social contact also costs a lot of energy. Turns out people don't think of that and just kind of go as themselves. However, that's supposed to work. Also, genuinely enjoying being alone. I told a friend that I will just lock myself in my flat for a few days to relax, and he said that's a bit extreme. For me, it's really nice and relaxing. I need my alone time and don't miss social contact as fast as other people. Story 19. Sounds causing actual physical sensations. I don't just mean the sound waves that everyone hears. I'm talking about actual shapes with textures and movements in and around my torso. It turns out I have tactile audio synesthesia. Almost everyone who has any type of synesthesia is surprised when they finally figure out that other people don't experience the world the way that they do. Story 20. I didn't realize that people didn't memorize movies to keep from being bored. When I was a kid, we lived pretty far from my grandparents, so that was a long trip in the car. So I learned that I could break up the time by re-watching a movie as we drove. So I was praised for being able to sit still, but I was reciting Aladdin or Land Before Time in my head the whole time. I still do this to some extent. The last time I was able to drive down to Florida, I looked at the trip time and thought, oh, that's not too bad. That's 2 Hamiltons and a Lion King. I didn't realize that other people didn't memorize scripts down to the actor's inflections until I took an acting course. And monologues and cold reads came really easy to me. It turns out most people remember certain lines that they like or remember a funny scene is coming up. I felt like the biggest dork when I explained it. Story 21. I live in the U.S. and was pretty astonished when I went to college out of state and met a whole lot of people who'd never heard of Tonga. The first person I thought was wildly ignorant. To me, it was like being unaware that China exists. Like, yeah, we don't live anywhere near Tonga, but surely you've met a billion Tongans. How have you never heard of Tonga? But shortly after that, I told a friend of mine that I'd met an astonishingly ignorant person who'd never heard of Tonga, and turns out my friend had never heard of it either, and neither had anyone else we were friends with at college. When I then Googled Tonga and showed my friends that it exists, in the same article we pulled up to read all about Tonga, it happened to mention that my hometown has the largest population of Tongan people outside of Tonga. Hence why I thought everybody on Earth had met Tongans. Story 22. I didn't realize I was probably mildly allergic to shellfish until I was about 21. I was having a sushi bowl in college and was telling my girlfriend that I love shrimp and crab, but I always get a nauseous headache whenever I eat it. She had to tell me that wasn't normal and I probably had an allergy. Realized that probably made sense. BC several of my fam members had shellfish allergies. Since childhood, I have been eating shrimp and crab and feeling funky afterwards. I literally just thought eating crab gave everyone headaches. Story 23. I am intolerant to lactose and in elementary school would look around wondering how everyone else seemed so comfortable when they must be holding in the same amount of air. Especially odd that I was the only one rattling the halls mid-class to try to find relief without being exposed. Really confused me for years. Story 24. Someone asked how I learned to braid my own hair. I explained that I picture in my head what it looks like as if I'm braiding someone else's hair while braiding my own, like if I was watching myself. They looked at me like I was crazy and said they cannot do that. I didn't know it wasn't a common thing. Story 25. I never knew that people actually see things in their head when they visualize something. Like, I think of an apple, I know what it looks like, but I don't actually see anything. And it blew my mind that people actually do see things in their head. It never occurred to me. I just thought that we knew what things look like when we imagine things, but as it turns out, I have a fantasia. Story 26. Grew up with extremely absent parents. Father was at work 90% of the time. Mother was always busy with something else, meaning anything you can think of that's under the sun. Hobbies, friends, her siblings, or her parents. Everything, except her kids. I grew up under the impression that this was just how things were. During my teen years and started to hang out more and more at my friends' homes, I was totally shocked how much of a normal person their parents were. They were just like grown-up kids. They hung out with their kids, casual talk, etc. Story 27, being afraid of your dad. Like, my dad wasn't a monster who did awful stuff to us, but he was just kind of mean and strict and shouty and cold. My best friend when I was a kid had a similar relationship with her dad, and my first girlfriend too. I was in my early 30s when I had the epiphany that scary wasn't a defining feature of father for lots of people. He died when I was 20. Story 28, maladaptive daydreaming. If I hear any song, I can imagine myself in a music video and imagine people watching it on my channel website. I've had this thought process since I was about 10, 11. I used to walk miles a day maladaptive daydreaming to music, to the where I'd walk 4, 6 a day, not just around my neighborhood in circles, but a path, pacing back and forth in my own yard. Now I just do it while I'm in the car, taking a quick walk or doing housework. I also daydreamed so much as a kid. I'm horrible at math because of this. I had a teacher once write "warning daydreamer" to my future teacher. I accidentally seen the note on her desk. Story 29. My sister does this. She will need something but be hesitant to ask. So while trying to work up the nerve to call, she will imagine the conversation. She will imagine asking the question, then she will imagine your response. She will have the whole conversation in her head, and since she has a bit of a persecution complex, coupled with a guilty conscience, she always imagines an argument where she is being denied. The result is that by the time she calls you, she is already pissed off at you. You answer the phone and wonder, why are you mad at me? What did I do? She would offend the very person she was calling for help, borrow money, get a ride, etc., and pretty much ensure that she would get turned down. This only reinforced her behavior because it would prove that she was right all along. It took a long time and a great deal of effort to get her to change a little. Story 30, visual migraines. I'll get like moving zebra patterns in my vision that make it hard to see things and affect my peripheral vision. I gather these are like the halos some migraine sufferers get before the pain sets in, but I never get the actual pain migraine part. I'd asked my eye doctor about them, and he knew just what I was talking about. He gets them too. It's caused by some type of convulsing activity in the visual center of the brain, if I remember what he told me correctly. You know it's a brain thing because it's not specific to one eye. Story 31. I always knew that there were some people who grew up in abusive households or had bad relationships with their parents, but I didn't realize how common that was until I got older. I thought dysfunctional families were like a rare exception, or that the extent of dysfunction was very small and like within the realm of just typical family quirks like it is in my own family. Story 32. Hiding what it was like at home. Whether out of shame or fear, I thought it was normal to never disclose what happened at home. As a child, I found it difficult to open up and trust people because of it. It wasn't until I got older that I realized how much of an impact it had on me, how normalized it had become for me to shield abusive behavior. By then, I had already entered an abusive marriage and had begun putting my children through the same mess I had experienced as a child. Story 33. Some people have parents, like actual adults for parents. Not whatever cluster of emotional dysfunction I got. I mean, they did their best, but when I think about it, their best didn't mean much. Some of my friends' parents in high school, while not perfect, had advice, and it actually worked. Like real advice, they were actually available and wanted the best for their kids, and were emotionally and financially capable of deprioritizing themselves for 5-10 minutes to actually listen and be helpful. Story 34. I thought it was normal for parents to pay your university's hostel and holiday bills till you're settled. I didn't know otherwise. Before you scream, I am from India, where my parents funded my college, universities, and my higher education abroad, and they did the same for my sister when she went to United States for her higher studies. They even helped with first car, down payment for home and wedding funds. All these changed when I landed in United States, Europe in my 20s. My peers were drowning in their education debts and still are. They have completed their studies, landed themselves good jobs, and still paying their educational loans. It doesn't mean that I grew up not having healthy appreciation for money or didn't work hard to reach where I am, but my parents certainly had a big role to play, and I will always be grateful for that. I suppose it's the cultural aspect because most Asian parents still do it, and I never realized things are different in other parts of the world. Story 35. From a young age, I could play any tune on any instrument I knew how to play. I thought that was normal, and people just did not know the instrument. To me, humming a tune or whistling a tune is the same as playing a tune on a piano or flute. If I know the song well enough to hum, I can play it. I only learned that was unusual when I started playing in a band. It earned me some free meals playing piano in a bar in college. Story 36. There's a point in life at which I realized that the vast majority of people simply do not experience the same mechanical empathy and the corresponding satisfaction in those sort of processes. Simplest example is shifting gears in a vehicle. Car, truck, tractor, whatever. There's a small, simple satisfaction I get out of that. Most people do not. Most people just sort of blurge around and move between gears because they have to, and things are grinding and clutches are burning, and the whole thing is just imprecise until they toss it in neutral and give up. For me, there's a little scratch of contented satisfaction when I make that shift just right. Every shift. When you can feel that mechanical engagement just right. When you successfully get all the parts to mesh correctly. Story 37. I always thought it was normal for kids to spend all of their time in their room and avoid interacting with their families until I got older. And I had friends that spent all their time in the living room with their parents who actually like being around them, and who they in turn enjoy being around. Turns out my mom was just a miserable alcoholic who made our home a dark place to spend time in, and she never wanted to be around us for long periods of time. Story 38. Sleeping with background noise. Ever since I was a child, there was always some background noise in my house. The TV on, the hum of the washing machine, or even the conversations that could be heard from the kitchen. For me, that was normal. I got used to that constant murmur helping me sleep, and when everything was silent, it was incredibly hard for me to fall asleep. Story 39, not medically planning your days. I have to be at the dentist at 13 o'clock, so I have to leave at 12:40. Brush my teeth at 12:30. Have lunch at 11:45, I guess. Start making lunch at 11:30. But the washer just beeped, so I guess I have to do that at 11 o'clock, etc., etc. When it's an appointment in the morning, this will also include what time I have to go to sleep the night before, when to get ready for bed, when to prep my son's lunch, and so on. Also, I'm pretty much in wait mode till that whole routine starts. Story 40, relentless teasing as a way of expressing love. My family is kind of ed up and cruel. They don't see it that way. They almost can't express love unironically. They tease and banter to show attention, and by extension, love. I know they love me, and I love them. But it's hard for outsiders to understand the dynamic, and it can be hard to feel fully loved inside of it. It was really difficult adjusting to my partner's needs in romantic relationships as an adult, to tone down my urge to make fun when I feel affectionate towards someone, and to say kind things more directly. Story 41. I'm 40. I only learned a few years ago that an inner monologue wasn't just a plot device in movies and shows. In fact, most people have it. When it would have a voice portraying it on TV and describing what the person was thinking, I really thought it was just how they wanted to tell the story, like exclusively just something used on screen. Baffled to learn that I was one of the odd ones for not having this myself. I also cannot picture things in my mind and always wondered why, despite being good at drawing, etc., I couldn't draw without a reference, and marveled at how people could do that. Like, how can someone just draw a very accurate gorse without a picture of a horse to show them what the horse looks like? Turns out that most people can think of a horse and see it in their mind. They can also hear themselves actively think of the horse in words or whatever. What? My brain works more in like concepts and a general awareness rather than words or pictures. People think this means my mind must be quiet, but it is far from that. I can't shut my brain off, thanks autism and ADHD, at all, and always have too many thought streams happening at once. So many that I get overwhelmed and paralyzed from doing any action. It's just that I don't get words or pictures for those thoughts. Story 42. Constant ringing in the ears. As far back as I can remember, I've had a consistent ringing in my ears. It slowly crept up and got worse over the years. I've always needed sound to sleep, otherwise it's torture. My boyfriend asked to turn the TV off while we slept, and I said to him, Doesn't the ringing drive you mad when there's no other noise? His look of confusion instantly told me it wasn't normal. Then I Googled and found out I have tinnitus. I've had it since I was 5. My parents always put the radio on because I wouldn't sleep otherwise. Story 43. Feeling like I just woke up from a 15-year-long coma for 2 hours after I eat. Like absolutely all body-dragging lethargy. Like someone hung weights every 2 inches all over my limbs. I'm not diabetic or pre-diabetic. I wondered how people go for walks after they eat or do other activities. I have to sit for like an hour. Apparently there's an actual term for this, but I don't remember it. Had no idea other people don't deal with that. Story 44. I lived about 10 years on this planet thinking that I hate grilled cheese sandwiches. Went to a sleepover one night and their mom made us grilled cheeses. I thought I had to choke it down, but it was the best grilled cheese I've ever had. Come to find out, my mother would put mayonnaise on my grilled cheese before she cooked it, my whole life. I thought that clear, gooey layer of sauce was just how grilled cheese sandwiches were supposed to be. I still complain to her about it, LOL. Story 45. I used to think that when people said, "Oh, if you have to get up early, just go to sleep early," it was some sarcastic joke in common use along the lines of, "Oh, didn't scan, guess it's free," or "working hard or hardly working," since obviously you can't just go to sleep. Turns out not everyone has chronic insomnia. Story 46. Being able to recall old dreams. I mentioned dreams I had when I was 4/5. I'm 24 for reference. And people think I'm making it up, but I genuinely remember a lot of my dreams. Maybe not the entire thing or the story plot, but bits and pieces of different dreams I do remember. I remember how old I was, what I did after waking up from it also. Learned real quick not everyone can do this, which is strange to me, but I'm a heavy visual learner and an artist, so it makes sense I remember images easily. Story 47. Being able to recognize people you know outside where I know them from. When I see someone outside my normal frame of reference for that person, say a coworker out in public, I do not recognize them. I recognize them just fine at work, but I could walk past them in a store and not know who they are. Usually the sound of their voice is what triggers me to know who they are. I have been in a store when a coworker started talking to me, and it's like their face transforms from a sort of blankish face to one that I recognize. When I go to the airport to pick up my parents, I take my dog because she will recognize them and give me a hint as to where I should be looking. If I'm meeting my parents somewhere, they know to look for me and come over, otherwise I won't be able to see them. I've traveled with friends, and I have to be careful to stay with at least one of them at all times. Otherwise, I won't be able to find them again unless they find me first. I try to pay attention to what my friends are wearing so that I can hopefully recognize them by their clothes instead of their face. Sometimes if someone has a very distinguishing feature, like colored hair, I find it easier to recognize them. Story 48. Seeing/interacting with ghosts. I just thought that everyone lived in a haunted house and had to deal with things being moved and ghosts trying to take their energy. I think I was 30 before I found out that some places weren't haunted, because even my college dorm had them. I also thought that everyone could see/feel/or hear them, and that it was just one of those impolite subjects to talk about. Story 49. I thought it was weird that people could stop watching a movie or TV show right in the middle and pick it up later. I thought it was weird in school that kids would read books in between classes. You don't have time to finish a chapter. Why start if you're going to have to stop part way? I thought it was weird that people could play a game and stop whenever without getting to the end of a level. Turns out I was the weird one. I have OCD, and not finishing something is a part of that. Sure, it's nice to finish things, and some people do, but I had to finish something. If I knew I didn't have time, I wouldn't even start. Therapy is helpful. So is getting diagnosed. I can kind of stop things partway, kind of. It still makes me crazy uncomfortable, though. Story 50. Speaking truth. I don't see reasons to lie unless I am being threatened or somehow otherwise in danger. But then I realize that people lie all the time, for no reason at all, or have subjects they don't like to talk about. That is so weird. I remember psychologists asked me to name such themes, and I was like, what? If it's just talk, how can it possibly hurt me? But it seems like it works like that for other people. In certain subjects, they would not tell the truth or not talk about it at all. Not being able to understand how others will react on specific action. It seems like most people can read others and predict them. Also, I wondered why most of the actors are ugly or neutral looking. Thought it's because they selected not for their appearance, but for their acting skills. But it turns out that I just have unusual taste for appearance. Story 51. My allergies are bad and sometimes my ears pop. So since childhood, I started clenching my jaw and making a really loud, like humming sound. It would always seem to help, even though Mom kept trying to teach me to plug my nose and pop them. But instead, I used a sequence of short hum sounds. Mom would always say it sounded like I was slow or deaf. I've always done it, still do, and every time someone new hears me, they are like, WTF is that you're doing? Story 52. I thought it was super normal for school principals and resource officers to pull their favorite kids and stuff from class to hang out with them. In high school, our principal had a child in said high school and children from a marriage in middle school. He'd pull kids out of classes, send excusing notes when kids did not want to go to class. And our resource officer had a small room he strung lights up in, had beanbag chairs, would hand on candy and drinks specifically to popular pretty girls. My principal was arrested with 2.4 terabytes of CP in a major sting. The resource officer was fired after allegations of him groping teen girls. We all thought they were cool teachers. Now we are all 25 and gagging at the real fact. Story 53. Eye-watering jaw pain, but only for a couple of seconds after the first bite of every meal. Had it all my life, but nobody seems to know what I'm talking about. Until recently, I thought it was a universal thing. Husband asked me why I winced, and I said, you know when you've not eaten for a while and your jaw really hurts when you start eating? And he was like, no. Can someone relate to me on this? I'm in my 30s and had this my entire life. Story 54. The derogatory voice in my head, I literally just call it the voice. I once woke from a dream where I cheated on my girlfriend and the voice called me every name under the sun. Then as I started to realize it was just a dream, the voice backed off, so the voice only knows what I know. I never got an apology. Story 55. Thinking of words and letters in color. My whole life, the months of the year have appeared as a string of different colors in my head. February pink, April red, June blue, November brown, etc. Whenever I think about, say, the month of June, I get an overwhelming feeling of blue subconsciously and all but see it as blue in my head. One time in middle school, I was talking with a friend and said that June was my favorite month because I liked the color blue. They did not understand the connection, so I just started listing off words that were blue in case they needed more examples. That was the day I discovered I have synesthesia, LOL. Story 56. I'd have to say like a year ago when it was going around that some people don't have an inner monologue. As someone with one, I couldn't understand how someone thought about things without it. And seeing all the people that don't have it freaking out about the idea and how different it seems shows me that the other way is just as surprised about it. I believe this all started with someone tweeting out a picture of 5 objects starting with a red circle and moving up in detail until the 5th is a picture of an apple, talking about the level of detail people have in their mind's eye. And a lot of people were like, you can see pictures in your brain, what the hell? Story 57. Many individuals believe that attending family reunions with loud, boisterous talks and everyone talking over one another is normal, until they learn it is not. It could be a cultural thing. Some families thrive on the energy and commotion, whilst others prefer quieter, more reserved relationships. It's startling to realize that what some people consider to be a normal family gathering can be overwhelming for others. Story 58. Coughing after running exercise. When I was little, I loathed running because it made me cough hard and I couldn't breathe. But teachers only called me lazy, and so I grew up thinking I was lazy and never complained to my mom. Only after my daughter went to an allergologist, she has severe peanut allergy, and he asked if she did the same and explained that is a type of asthma that I knew it was not normal, nor for being lazy. Story 59. I grew up really liking both my parents and truly enjoyed their company. Most of my friends thought that was odd. They complained almost daily about mom, this, dad, that. I didn't really have anything to complain about. As I'm a retired mom now of 63, I get along with my 2 adult kids. We enjoy going to movies, shopping, cafes. Now my friends complain that they don't have relationships with their kids. I thought family togetherness was normal until others disagreed. Story 60. Windows Media Player visuals when I close my eyes and listen to music. If you're too young to know what this is, think Remy from Ratatouille when he eats the cheese and strawberry together. Hearing the TV while dark and on video. Your cheap charger is making too much noise. The overhead light that is nearing its lifespan is making too much noise. New hybrid electric cars make this whirring, humming sound which makes me nauseous, but no one else can fucking hear it. Story 61. I can't smell that thing they're describing. Maybe I will later. No big deal. This seems normal until you realize it was every smell. I was kind of oblivious to a lot of things when I was young, but the fact I could not smell pretended well enough even I didn't realize I couldn't, and it took me to the age of 15 or so to realize it's called anosmia. My experience is fairly common for congenital anosmics. Most of us aren't told we can smell. We grow up thinking it's normal and eventually figure it out ourselves as we become more self-aware. Anosmics are somewhat rare, about 1 in 80 according to old data, but that is common enough you probably know one. Story 62. I thought it was normal to think that at any moment someone could attack me. Growing up, my dad instilled the fear of being kidnapped in me. I just thought it was normal to always assume the worst in people. This caused a lot of fear and problems in trusting people. I thought everyone was this cautious, and even got annoyed at people who were too trusting. Story 63. Vivid daydreaming. Intense and often convoluted stories with original characters, sometimes inspired by the or film characters, and with the ability to daydream in theory for hours and hours, picking up the story from where you last left it. Especially with music. I thought everyone did this and that's just what daydreaming was, but it turns out that I have something called maladaptive daydreaming, and not everyone does this. Story 64. Pain. I'd get numbed or prescribed painkillers, and I still felt everything painful. Just figured that's the way it was. Suck it up and deal with it. To the point I just never took painkillers because they just made me feel disconnected. Recently had dental surgery and asked the doc if I should still feel before he got busy. He said no. I said, but I do. He numbed me again. During the surgery, I winced. He asked if I felt that. I said yes. He numbed me again. Happened one more time. From what I gather, my body reacts differently to painkillers that don't work. Story 65. I assumed that everyone's sense of smell was like mine. It was only in my 20s that I realized I can smell a lot of stuff that nobody else can. Like my husband sprays cologne 6 rooms away and I know as soon as he does. My friend takes a sip of rice drink and talks to me 30 minutes later and I know. I stop mentioning things because people think I'm really weird. It's not my fault. Story 66. I was way into adulthood when I realized that not everyone sees music as lines. Each song has its own distinct shape and curve or a straight line. Sometimes the color changes throughout the song. Also, concepts like time, let's say the calendar year, is a giant circle. The angle you view the circle from changes depending on the time of year you are thinking of. Events in time are blocks the circle is made of. When you want to think about a certain period of time, you lift that block out of the circle and view the contents. Data or information is stored like folders. Need to recall the correct socket size for that exhaust manifold, the price for a pound of sirloin steak at Price Chopper grocery store in July 2006? Heck, what size drywall your coworker told he ordered for a project 20 years prior in another state? Just find and open that folder. It's all right there. 15 mm medium depth socket. A standard 15 mm isn't long enough and a deep socket won't clear the subframe. So you buy a deep 15 mm and cut it down with an angle grinder. $6.99 per pound. Every Friday night that summer we grilled steaks and got hammered drunk. 14x4 sheets because they were hanging vertically in the office building he was remodeling in Athens, Ohio. I've never been to Athens. I guess this is synesthesia. Story 67. I have torus palatinus in my mouth, in several locations. One of these locations is on the top roof of my mouth. It is a large lump curving down. I thought everyone's mouths were like this for 35 years of my life. One day my husband yawned with his head tilted back, and I noticed he didn't have the roof lump like I did. This is how I found out. Story 68. When I have a chesty cough, I experience the feeling of having an itch at the back of the insides of my lungs. It makes me want to scratch my back, but it's frustrating because I can't reach the itch as it's on the inside of my rib cage. Only in my late 20s did I complain about it verbally to somebody else and found out they have no idea what I meant and were a bit freaked out by it. Turns out nobody else I know experiences this either. Story 69. Just realized at 52 that I have MCAS and my whole life my immune system has been working wrong. Most days I have brain fog, fatigue, itchy skin, allergic rhinitis, anxiety, and loads of digestive issues. I often beat myself up for not being sharp enough, but I don't see anyone around me dealing with this. I know I'm not the only one, but I've never met another. Story 70. Getting your appendix removed. Had mine removed when I was 11 years old because it got inflamed. Same happened to my 2 siblings. Inflamed and removed at the age of 11. Had a talk to some coworkers the other day about it, and all of them are still having their appendix. Looked it up on the internet, and then it dawned to me for the first time that it's not normal at all to get it removed.